Welcome to my second video on the Roland TR8S. When I bought this machine back in August 2018, when I did that video, I'd had this machine exactly one day, and my thoughts at the time were really very limited by what I'd explored so far. It's now January 2019, and I've used this machine extensively in my studio and as part of my live rig in CSMA, and I know much more now about this machine and really its design ethos than what I did back in August, as a result of which I can now update my thoughts on this machine. The first point is, I complained back in August that it was very easy to lose the pattern that you're working on if you don't set up a proper name and one thing and another in the pattern settings. In reality, if you hold down Shift and press right and then press OK, it will immediately save everything on this machine which you're working on at the time. So the positions of all the knobs, the drum kit that you've selected, the pattern that you're working on will all immediately be saved, and you don't have to name it at that point. Later on, of course, that's much more useful to name it and one thing and another. But if you just want to save where you are, while you want to turn the machine off for a while, that's all you need to do, and everything is saved. My second complaint at the time was that I would have liked an arrangement window, but in reality this machine is not about defining songs, setting it up, pressing go and then just simply recording it or jamming over the top. This really is a live instrument, and as such you don't really need an arrangement window. You just need to have that song in your head and what you're going to do, and you can just improvise with this. So that's the main thing that I've learned. The ethos of this machine is it's a great improvisational tool and it's a great composition tool at the same time. Of the other features, much of this is very easy to get going with quite quickly. Each of the instruments has its own volume control. That's particularly useful when you're setting up for a live show, whereby in the mix you might actually want your bass drum louder than what you would have in your studio. It's very easy to set all of these. The other thing that's really good is the accent. To use the accent function, it's quite simple. You select an instrument, such as if here we selected the bass drum. If you then press step, you can then set the volume of the accent, which makes a huge difference because you can then turn some of these on and some of these off. So the accent will only apply to the ones where you've actually set the step. So it's very easy to get a fall to the floor type sound. Now if I turn the, you can hear quite what a difference that actually makes. Another really nice design in this that's really useful is the auto fill-in. You can trigger this manually, or you can select it to come in after 2 bars, after 4 bars, after 8 bars, and you've got 12, 16 and 32. You can also in addition manually trigger this, and to define your fill-in all you need to do is select another variation, which we'll select here, and we'll put some snare rolls in. So this is our nice snare sound there. If you now press auto fill in on and the variation we've just selected for this, it will now define that as the fill-in part. So if I now turn this on, we go back to our original pattern. You can hear how that works. And also you can manually trigger it. And that's a really useful tool, particularly in a live situation whereby you might actually be improvising something and you just fancy putting a fill in, then it's just easy to trigger it by finger. The accent again makes a massive difference in how you want to set this up. Other great features of this, which are really useful, is you don't actually have to set a pattern as such. You can easily press instant play. And each of the buttons at the bottom becomes each of the instruments which you can manually trigger. So very often, which you can have running in the background is a very basic beat, and then you can put in your own fills over the top. You can record that by pressing the instant record button, and they will then just simply record that into the loop. But also you don't actually have to do that at all. You can just have it running on instant play. So just select our basic background, and if we wanted to put, we can put them in. We've got the roll controls here, so again, if we then set this running and we hold down the snare drum and then press roll, we can put these rolls in completely over the top and separate from the original pattern. This can make some really interesting textural effects and some really interesting dynamics. Again, the great thing about this is designed simply around improvisation. So you can have all this going. You can alter the volumes live. Whilst it's running, you can just simply easily add stuff. So whilst it's still running, we can add some hi-hats. And of course the other great thing with this is you've got a last button, and what that allows you to do is to shorten the pattern length on each individual instrument. This allows for some great polymetric effects. So if we take the snare drum, for example, we've got, if I now press the last button and press 12, as the snare drum gets to number 12, it will go back to the beginning, whilst the rest of the instruments will continue to play the full pattern. So you can get some really seriously complex effects by doing this. So let's do that with the bass drum, and we press the last button again and select number 8. This means to say it will only play up to number 8, and then it will go back to the beginning. The rest, all the other patterns, will be doing their own thing. And then of course we can add some more bass drums. So as you can see, we can just keep on adding and adding and adding like this all the time. And we've got the full effects, so we can add delay, we can add reverb, we can put our accent back on. We can also turn the fill-in off live, so that would then just simply play variation number 8. The control knobs here are also another very subtle design device. So if you press Control Select, you've got user, you've got pan, so you can pan them around. You've got delay, send, reverb, send, LFO, instant FX. There's a lot of things here that you can select and just simply have fun with. And in doing so, when you're doing this live, particularly with a motion recorder, you can get some really strange, interesting effects. One of the particularly nice options on the effects on the control is if you select user, you've got the options that are very similar to the called Volca beats, in that you can change the attack, the snappiness of the snare, the attack of the bass drum, the snappiness of the snare, the colours on the toms, various effects, various reverb, delays, high pass filters, etc., low pass filters. But you can do that live, and also you can select the motion recorder to record you turning the knob. So this is another layer of effects you can add. So if we do something like this now, if I then press motion record, you can then create these patterns which will have evolving sounds. The other two knobs, you've got a lovely tune knob and a decay button. The decay knob will obviously alter the length of the decay of each of the instruments, and the tune obviously does what it does. The great thing about having a tune like this and the motion sequencer is, of course, you can then create melodies with either the built-in synth samples that come with this machine, or with the drums themselves, because you can alter the pitch of them, and you can save those pitches, and you can also save the motion of turning those pitches. So for example, if we now erase, if we press shift and erase our motion, if we set the drum going, you can create effects like that. You can also lock them into individual steps as well. So there's lots and lots of possibilities here. The other interesting thing is, when you add beats, you can add weak beats as well, which are beats of a much lower velocity. So for things like snare drums, if you had a roll, let's say 11 and 12, if you press shift and 12, you'll see that light is much dimmer. The beat is still there, but the velocity is much reduced, so you get an effect like this. If I now, you can hear how that's, just by dropping the velocity on that, makes a big difference. So you can make rolls that sound a lot more natural. Now, one gripe I did have, which I still annoys me a bit, it's a shame that there's only one velocity sensitive pad, particularly because this has got an instant play and an instant record facility that I discussed earlier, that you can just simply push this stuff in. It would be much nicer if each of these buttons were actually velocity sensitive, such as using, for example, the Beat Step Pro or something like that, because for finger drummers, that would give them a lot more options to put in really realistic drumming patterns because of that velocity coming straight off their fingers. You can do it, but you've got to do each one in turn by using this. Whereas, because it's got this instant play and instant record, it would be so much nicer if this one pad was on all of them, and that would make, to me, that would make much more sense. But I suppose at some point, budget considerations come into this, and you do get an awful lot of machine for your money. There's no doubt about it. When you look at all the kits that come with this, straight out of the box, you've got all the Roland drum machines that's been made in the one box. I think I explained in the previous video, one of the great things is you can start with any particular kit. You can, of course, mix and match. So if we have a low tom here and we press instrument, you can easily change what that instrument is, and it could be all sorts of things. You can go through the whole lot. If you press shift and instrument, you can set what you do on the knobs here. So you can specifically set the pan, you can set the reverb, etc. As a point to begin with. If you don't want to just simply start and then twiddle the knobs, you can in fact set it that way, and then from that point onwards twiddle the knobs. So it becomes a very, very flexible instrument. One other thing that I would say is this is also great to use with drum racks in Ableton Live. If you haven't got a push or a launch pad or anything like that, and you want to create some nice drum patterns, it will write everything you do to MIDI. So by plugging this into Ableton Live and opening up the MIDI channel straight into drum racks, all of the fills, can't obviously use the instruments, but all of the musical functions, such as the polyrhythmic options, the scaling, and I think even the volume, will even transmit CCs as a volume. All of those will go straight into drum racks, so you can make some really great drum patterns in Ableton with drum racks by using this as a MIDI writer, and it works very, very well. You can drive any of the drum machines in drum racks with this, and it will record the MIDI, and away you go. Very, very simple, very good. One other great thing I do like, the mute function is particularly useful. If you hold the mute function up, by default they're all on. If they're lit up, they're all on. So if we set up pattern go, you've got the advantage to just simply be able to do, and that's really useful in a live situation. You can then do the club drop just simply by going. And so forth. And of course you've got the volume knobs, so you can muck about with those live. You can, as I said before, use any of these knobs, and it becomes a really seriously useful instrument just simply to improvise with as much as anything else. And it's great for generating ideas. It's great for working on working stuff up that you already have got worked out. It's really quite useful. One other option, there is a trigger output at the back, and these two channels here, the ride symbol and close symbol, they will also double as trigger outs. So you can use those to trigger other devices if you want. I've not done that yet, but that facility is there. Okay, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.